Hello guys, today we will be talking about what if Naruto and Hinata were silent prodigies part 1. If you enjoy this video please like and subscribe. Now let begin. So the device can only Hinata stumble to find the appropriate words, heat up the liquid at a certain rate. That, and the amount that can be fed into the weapon has to be limited just so you can carry it. And the weapon is still prone to overheating like before. Ichiru interrupted. The girl turned the machine over in her hands, analyzing it with observant eyes. So it can only be used once or twice before burning out, and its ammo count is relatively lower. Shiori jumped in to respectfully correct her mistress. A separate container can be constructed, and the fluid pumped in directly. Hinata nodded with an approving smirk. Sounds good to me. Let's hop to it. Naruto was having an interesting day. Soon after convening from the post-preliminary meeting, he spent most of the next day pestering Kakashi to teach him a few things. He seriously doubted the one-eyed Jonin would do so due to being more suited to overseeing Sasuke, but still, maybe the man was one to give in, if only to shut the blonde up. But of course, that didn't happen. Instead, the undercover genius got saddled with the closet pervert, Ibisu. While the special tutor's initial chakra exercise was far too basic for his tastes, the boy was having disturbing amounts of difficulties. That 5-point seal on his gut wreaked havoc with his system and was so foreign to him that he needed time to decipher it. That, or find a seal expert who's seen this before, he mused as he took the plunge into the searing hot water for the 100th time. That was the day he came face to face with the legendary Toad Sannin, Jiraiya. The Uzumaki immediately recognized the old man's name, but knew full well his idiotic persona would be lost as a kitten at the mere mention of the elderly ninja. The blonde eventually pestered the aging shinobi to take him under his wing, albeit haphazardly. He took a mental breath of relief when the old guy told him to take his shirt off. He had replaced his tattoo seals with his invisible ink just the day before. Cut it closer, will ya? He mocked himself. As the days of the allotted month of training dragged on, Naruto was amused to no end by the antics of the perverted Sannin. Every time he berated the old man as loudly as possible, he was secretly laughing his ass off at the guy's reactions. He was funny as hell. The blonde was also pleased on finally being able to get his hands on a summons contract. He rarely got out of training these days, unable to slip away from the keen eyes of the legendary ninja. If only he knew how observant the old man really was. As Jiraiya peered at the boy from the corner of his eye, he pondered, this kid's something else. When I took Orochimaru's 5-point seal off, I felt a huge rush of chakra in his system. His coils are really developed too, and I don't think it's because of all the nine-tailed fox's chakra running through him, either. A mere surge of power leaves the coils enlarged like something forced its way through, and his system's far too refined for that. He paused mentally as a thought struck him. It's as if he's been using advanced techniques for a long time, but I read the report on this kid. He's an idiot. He couldn't possibly use high-level techniques nobody's ever taught him, could he? His train of thinking continued along this line until a new gaggle of attractive girls passed in front of his bush. Oh ho! What of you? Danzo rifled through files not his own on his desk. His personal army had followed orders to relieve some documents from the Hokage's office. More specifically, documents pertaining to the head ninja's Anbu forces. The one-eyed elder shinobi had heard the report from Anko Mitarashi regarding the return of the rogue ninja Orochimaru. The root leader's ambitions dictated that Konoha remain safe at all costs, but there would have to be sacrifices to do so, and what better sacrifices than those of his unofficial rival? His stark mind noticed a sudden presence morphing from the darkness of the room's shadowed corner. Sten, he addressed the hooded figure, what news do you bring? My supervisor has told me to inform you of the progress of our part of the bargain regarding our agreement. Danzo halted his motions of flipping through the many pages of Elite Ninjas. This was far more important. What have you to report? We have been monitoring Orochimaru for quite some time as the Chunin exam rolled on, bringing with it the preliminary rounds due to a surplus of remaining examinees. Curse and Silence participated in the fights as they saw fit. Naruto, knowing his idiotic pride wouldn't allow him to lose to an imbecile like Kippa, decided to cut a close with his victory. Hinata, on the other hand, knew her older cousin Niji was considered a genius of the gentle fist style, and his loss by her hands would signal the end of her shy girl persona. That wouldn't do, so she threw the fight with no one being the wiser. She even had to hold off on utilizing her chakra to heal her inconsequential injuries. How would she explain having no wounds whatsoever when she was so clearly scarred during the mock battle? On a side note, the blue-haired genius was impressed by the Uzumaki's performance against her smelly teammate. Looks like he got better, she mused as the boy thoroughly trounced the dog-like boy. Even if he did win by a fart, she giggled internally at the idea of passing wind defeated a superior force. Naruto was also taken aback by the skills exhibited by the girl. He smirked a bit to himself when she lasted as long as she did against a self-proclaimed prodigy. She even adopted my way of the ninja, he thought. That's so freaking cute. His mind began to ponder the concept that, should he never actually find someone, maybe her sweet and subservient nature would be all he needed to get by. When the skirmishes to determine the 10 required participants came to a close, the geniuses, hospitalization aside, returned to their respective hidden lives to continue their veiled war against Takemi and her private army. It had been a week since Hinata's return from the infirmary, and she was already back in full swing as far as her personal research went. During her absence, Shiori and Ichiro had been working on the assignment given to them, discover a surefire way to obliterate every ounce of the Jashin follower. Upon the return of their mistress, the assembled Hyugas handed their findings over with pride. Here, mistress, Shiori said with her usual undue cheeriness, as she pushed forward an overflowing folder to the intelligent girl. We narrowed down our results pretty early on, Ichiro added with that trademark twitch of his cheek. We were even able to find a shortcut for it. It's a liquid, the female semi-living woman explained as Hinata flipped through the extensive report, that can be injected into the energy weapon and infused with the same properties as the energy blast. A liquid, you say? She inquired half-heartedly without breaking her gaze on the paper. Yes, mistress. It still contains the properties of a liquid at the same time, too. Like a gel? No, ma'am, the male Hyuga interjected. It's more like heavy water. It flows the same. The girl furrowed her brow in interest and broke her eyes from the huge report. Really? You got any on hand? Of course. Right this way. Mistress dot a steel and glass container and tapped a code into adjacent control panels, prompting the lid to slide open with a hiss of freezing mist. The undercover prodigy waltzed over to the pedestal and grasped her modified energy weapon, which now sported a cylindrical tube welded right above the handle, along with multicolored wires flowing to the tip of the device. Got a target set up for me right here, mistress. Shiori presented a solid block of lead at least 6 inches in width and length. She placed the heavy cube on a glassy pedestal and waved her hand in an inviting gesture. Place the tip of the weapon on top of this and pull the trigger. Silence did as she was told, and, as soon as the trigger was pulled, the machine whirred violently and the fluid swished in the tube and oozed out onto the metal block. Upon contact, the glowing watery substance slowly dripped down the lead, smoking like mad as the metal melted. The liquid spread exponentially as time went on, and soon enough, the block as well as its pedestal drooped to the floor as its molecular structure boiled away. This works great, the Hyuga exclaimed as the burning liquid ran dry. A little slow, but this is fantastic. Unfortunately, it only works at point-blank range, Shiori pointed out with a smile, while scratching. The old warhawk mulled the vague statement over for a moment. What do you plan to do? Your payment has already been delivered, so we will neutralize the deciding factor in this new threat. Please keep in mind that our agreement dictates that my organization keep the lowest of profiles. I understand perfectly. Danzo sat back in his seat and eyed the cloaked man. His keen eye for ideal shinobi material kicked in, and he had to speak up. What village were you affiliated with before siding with our associate? The unusual stranger betrayed the most emotion the warhawk had ever seen him display. He arched an eyebrow. After a few seconds, he answered, I have never been a part of any village. A pity. You would have made a perfect shinobi. Is this an attempt to recruit me? The old warhawk chuckled. My apologies. Your lack of emotions doesn't impede your judgment. He trailed off, noticing his visitor's blank stare full of disdain. If long awkward silences could kill a man, Danzo would have been dead 1,000 times over. Is that all? The hooded man stated apathetically. When no reply was given, he continued, Then I shall take my leave. He backed into the pitch-black corner and disappeared into the shadows. A dark passageway within the compound of the Hidden Sound Village was silent save for a barely noticeable wind gusting through the ventilator shafts. Within the hushed tunnels existed an equally dim room containing IV drips and monitors that pulsed with lights indicating vital signs alongside countless other bits of medical information. A man lay prone on a clean bed in the center of the chamber, clearly ill even by a normal person's standards. His eyes fluttered ever so slightly at the inaudible pulsating of a light that coalesced with every color known to man in a corner of the room, but the young man did not awaken. TWO figures approached the sick individual, one in a worn blue suit with a pale complexion, and the other donned in an aged lab coat that had seen better days. As the duo neared the slumbering youth, the man in the suit spoke with his trademark lisp. Well, doctor, here he is. Perform the necessary operations. Right, the presumed doctor replied as if he had nothing better to do. He fingered a syringe from his dirtied clothes and hastily inserted it into one of the IV drips attached to the bedridden man. Almost instantaneously, the lights on the monitors fluctuated as the youth's vitals dropped or escalated to dangerous levels. Remind me why we're doing this again? Don't we have a contract with this guy? Not with Orochimaru. The strange man hissed like a snake. Our connections with him were terminated when he violated our agreement. Do I even want to know? The medical man asked with a sarcastic sneer as his pinky finger dug into his ear. It's best if you not ask questions. You are not quite as well informed regarding the business transactions of our organization. Whatever, he replied, flicking away the waxy goodness he extracted. He glanced at the heavy door when he heard rapid footsteps and multiple voices of concern echoing down the hallway. We stay in for tea or what? We shall take our leave, the man in the suit replied before a brilliant show of light washed over them, obscuring their forms from view. A moment later, they disappeared from the Snake's Annan's compound. The following instant, Kabuto and a handful of sound medics burst into the room and surrounded the youth, applying every manner of healing techniques and technology available to them. Shit, the Yakushi swore. What the hell happened? His condition shouldn't be this bad. Instructions were thrown around like there was no tomorrow, as the medic ninjas scrambled to save the patient from the brink of death. An eternity later, the young man's life was stable, but he would never fight again. Damn it, Kabuto gnawed on his thumb before turning to one of his coworkers. Inform Orochimaru that Kamimaro Kagaya's condition is critical. I don't think he'll be able to fight in Konoha. That evening, Naruto managed to sneak home amidst the careful watch Jiraiya seemed to have placed on him. Damn, he grumbled as he changed his clothes, even the old perv's gettin' wise. Even so, he smirked to himself as he thought about what he had gained. In his spare time underneath Konoha, he had already somewhat perfected the art of summoning. He still couldn't invoke the leader of the Toads, but he had already established good relations with several notable frogs. He emerged from his hidden chamber into the extensive catacombs in search of either a fight or his temporary ally. Since engaging in battle with silence during this tumultuous time would be counterproductive, he at least wanted to show off his newfound skills. Wait a second, he suddenly realized as he dodged and weaved through narrow and wide tunnels alike. Contracts don't circulate very much, and there are few people who can summon a certain animal. When I finally publicize my skills with summoning toads, silence will know exactly who I am. He tortured himself mentally as his surroundings whizzed by in a dim blur. What do I do? What do I do? He continued to agonize over the decision until he came upon the hub, the familiar vertical shaft of interconnecting passageways which saw more and more action these days. He paused, wondering which adjacent tunnel to take when he saw movement from the corner of his azure eye. His head swiveled as he instinctively dropped into a low stance while reaching around to his back and unsealing his modified ninjato only to gaze upon Silence's smooth brilliant blue mask. The fellow genius was lugging a steel 1-liter tank horizontally across the back of her waist under yin and yang, and a thin dark tube that ran from the container to a familiar-looking energy weapon strapped to her thigh. Something new? The blonde asked as he eased his position and pointed half-heartedly at the modified device. Damn straight, she replied with a grin hidden by her visage and a slight playfulness in her pristine voice. So what's up? Not much. He realized he was smiling as well. Figured we'd kick some foreigner ass tonight. Sounds like a plan. The intelligent girl exclaimed as she formed chakra in her foot and stepped off with a great leap, sailing through the air alongside her fellow genius. You have a plan, right? Yet, the blonde replied nonchalantly while digging a hand through his dull camouflage jacket and extracting a worn rolled-up paper. He nodded his head towards the ground, signaling the duo to stop for a moment. Hinata obeyed and he unraveled the document, revealing a crude marked-up map of the catacombs. He pointed to a series of red circles and explained, "This is the base of Takemi's army. This outer area is something of a perimeter. This is living quarters, I think, and this is the command center. And we were the Hyuga." Scanned the sheet, mentally cross-checking her notes with her rivals, and tapped a section of paper when she figured it out. About here, right? You got it. So now we go that way. He thrust an extended finger to their right. He replaced the map and stood with his temporary ally. Let's go. Yep, she responded simply before jolting away next to the boy as the dual geniuses sped off. A pair of light crimson eyes peered at them from a passing corridor, unblinking and void of any. Chia sat huddled in a corner of her crude cell, wrapped in her dirty comforter up against the seal-decorated bars. Her brown eyes were locked in horror at the sight across from her. Lying against the opposite corner was a perfect mirror image of herself, albeit with a few differences of the personality aspect. The false mental projection sat cross-legged with one elbow balancing on a knee, while the adjoining hand supported her head. A sick grimace spread across her messy features, and she spoke with a certain tone that the disturbed girl lacked. Sort of look at how bad things are. The image stated simply that you're even starting to see me. Shut up, Shia whispered, terrified that her second personality had begun to manifest itself into a hallucination. Jay, just shut up. And what can you do? The projection continued unabated. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. In fact, that's why I exist at all. Shut up. Her voice was growing louder. to pull your sorry ass out of the fire. I am a necessary part of your sad existence. Shut up, I am everything you're not. I think about your situation, I am your passion, I am your strength. Shut up. She'll Osterkulen shrieked at the empty corner. Shut up. Shut up. The image's eyebrows arched upwards at the sudden display of confidence. Fine, I'll stay quiet for now, but you gotta realize you can't do this forever. The brown-haired girl said nothing as she stared into the abyss. Her alter ego's words struck deep, and deep down she knew her second personality was right. Shia, the mental projection, said authoritatively, I don't care if you wanna die or not, but you're not dragging me down with you. I do. Why you care? The disturbed girl shouted in pent-up frustration, It's my life. It's my life too. The vision stood in anger and approached the prone girl. Just because we share the same body doesn't mean we share the same fate. If it wasn't for me, YUW wouldn't exist. She began to crawl back into her hole of shyness. Am right, was the merciless reply. If it wasn't for your weakness, I wouldn't have to shoulder your problems. The cruel second self's features softened ever so slightly, and she took a seat at Shia's feet, peering at the young girl with cold, calculating eyes. Every action I've taken has been to keep both of us alive, and you know that's true. I'm just telling you what you need to hear. She leaned forward a hair. If you get out of here, don't stay with Curse. The brown-haired girl blinked away the oncoming tears and glanced at the image with surprise. What you know what I'm talking about. He's treated you well so far, but who knows how long that will last. She leaned back and sighed. If you stay with him, you're going to die. Mark my words on that one. Shia could say nothing in return as her alter ego slowly began to fade from view. She knew full well that her second personality had never led her astray in the past, but it had also never made such a far-flung prediction either. Her troubled mind didn't know what to think. Her brown eyes subtly focused on the transparent ghost before her, and she shot out the first thing that came to mind. Do you have on aim? The disappearing image's eyebrows arched in honest surprise before her eyes narrowed and lips split into a sick grin. Thought you'd never ask. Call me Ayu. Takemi sat in her uncomfortable stone chair drinking hard whiskey and smoking unfiltered cigarettes per her custom when the Jashin follower entered the large chamber. Sup, fucker? She greeted nonchalantly. Yes, ma'am. Don't call me that, asshole. What about the rest of my dumbest troops? Only a few teams are stationed in the catacombs. The rest are on assignment as the noble servants and guards. The fiery woman sighed hard and took a swig of liquor followed by a long pull on her cigarette. She exhaled a puff of pristine smoke and spoke again. Any chance we can call some back as reinforcements? Not without alerting Konoha to our presence. Fuck. She depleted the current object of her oral fixation and lit another roll of tobacco. She exhibited no concern whatsoever. Oh well, can win 'em all I guess. Do you expect Duel's team to defeat them? Duel? Nah, no fucking way. Got too much shit on his mind, clouds his judgment. Fumetsu briefly recalled his crude commander's situation involving her daughter. The same could be said about you as well, Commander. Her eyes darkened, and she glared daggers and hate into the undying assassin. Fuck off. Her words were filled with as much venom as she could muster, and were spoken with slow clarity so as to portray her lethal seriousness. Curse and silence charged down an enlarged hallway with minimal noise being generated by their swift footsteps. According to Shia's notes, their current position was somewhere just behind the perimeter of the foreign army. Hey, Hinata began as their where is everyone? Her Byakugan didn't see anything, but she knew full well that there were certain combinations of seals that could impede its sight. If these guys have been here for as long as I think they have, they might know about its weaknesses. Naruto managed to shrug in mid-stride. No idea. I wonder if anyone's waiting for us. What? He suddenly cried as he was shoved to the side. What are you? Oh. His answer flew by attached to a chain. In a flash, he repositioned himself in midair and his steel-plated Jetta sandal slammed into the wall. The blue-haired genius landed similarly on the opposite wall, clenching her teeth as she did so. Oh yeah, they know how to bypass the Byakugan. Good thing that thing was in the open. She didn't have to glance back to see the clear form of a freakishly long staff with two opposing sickle blades at either end. Curse, she called as she reached for Yin and Yang at the end of the hall. Got it. He yelled back, then spun off the wall and grasped the long chain attached to the dual sickle. He reeled back, collecting chakra in his chest and preparing to exhale in a burst of searing flame. But before he could do anything, he was jerked forward when the chain surged back. Get off, I know. He leapt back against the wall as the huge double-sided weapon spun back down the corridor like a rotor from hell. When the huge weapon disappeared into the dim light, both prodigies sat still against the walls in preparation for another onslaught. You missed, a harsh voice echoed from the shadows. You sucked. The Konoha duo released themselves from the sides of the tunnel and landed on the floor, crouched and ready for the voice's owner and anyone else to emerge from the shadows. The patter of feet sounded off the walls in a casual manner, and, slowly yet surely, 4 figures appeared from the darkness. Curse in silence. A man donned in a mismatched mask greeted unpleasantly, "Pleased to meet ya." His brown hair was a tangled mess on one side, and neatly combed back on the other behind a visage painted porcelain white on one side, and dull olive green on the other. His clothes consisted of a bland light gray vest strapped over an extremely baggy brown sweater, and loose-fitting pants of a similar color. "Now, Curse," he turned towards the aforementioned genius with an outstretched arm, "they call me Duel, and I got business with you." Naruto's hidden azure eyes darted back and forth between the quadruple combatants, sizing them up as best he could. He instantly found the owner of the huge weapon, and he could best describe the man as evil personified. The tall man was covered from neck to toe in dozens of overlapping dark belts that only broke around the black-clad joints. His head hung low, face covered by a wild mane of long dark hair that sprung out in every direction, giving him the appearance of something demonic rather than human. In stark contrast to the swarthy man was a girl donned in cool, vibrant colors standing next to him. Her eyes were such a light crimson that they appeared pink in the poorly lit corridor, and her deep violet hair flowed gracefully between her shoulder blades. She wore something of a battle-ready kimono of a similar purple that was trimmed with a soft fabric that matched her eyes and held together by a smooth silk rope. The lower portion of her garb parted, revealing her legs clad in a similar violet fabric and feet wrapped in corresponding cloths without being sheathed in any kind of real footwear. Hinata wondered about the nationality of the girl, who appeared only a few years her senior when she noted the final combatant. Her bloodline instantly penetrated the odd man, and she stifled a gasp. What the hell happened to him? She wondered as she gazed at the man constricted by a straitjacket. The enemy swayed back and forth, swishing his overly colored hair in the air as he twitched every once in a while. The only outward evidence that anything was wrong with the man was the all-metal boots that he wore with 4 elongated steel-clad toes, each that moved on their own accord. "What are you staring at?" the masked man shouted, clearly irritated at the brief awkward silence. "You little pieces of shit. I'll kill you both." He shook his head to calm himself, then slapped a palm against the ninja in a straitjacket. "Mosh mosh, you're with me." Nina sighed. He addressed the other two. "You take the chick." The silent duo nodded and leapt forward with newfound speed, while Duel lunged at Naruto alongside Mosh Mosh. The Uzumaki and the Hyuga readied their weapons of choice, and the battle began. Saratobi sat in his recreational room in the Hokage Tower, enjoying a late-night smoke. He hadn't been able to sleep well because of the recent news regarding Orochimaru, and he preferred to spend those sleepless nights in the lobby set aside for his personal use. He normally resided in solitude while lost in his own thoughts, but tonight he had company who was equally disturbed about the return of the Snake-san, and Lord Hokage Anko said, anxiety dripping off of her like water. "Is there really nothing we can do about him? Do we really have to sit around waiting for him to make his move?" "I'm sorry, Anko," the elder shinobi returned between pulls on his pipe, "but the situation is very sensitive, and acting against him may start an international incident." He sighed at the ill memories of his former pupil. "It pains me just as much, but it is my duty to ensure the absolute safety of the village." "Safety?" the Mitarashi shouted in anger. "If we don't kill him soon, Konoha's safety will be the least of our problems." She slammed her palms on the table. "We have to take action now. Anko, please calm down. We have to." He paused, a look of minor concern etched across his aging features. "Did you feel anything?" Anko scrunched her face up in concentration, then slowly began to shake her head. "No, I didn't notice anything. Sorry, guess I'm just getting old." "Hey, Curse," Hinata shouted, then ducked under the vertical whirlwind of steel that was the double-sided scythe. "A little help here, I got problems too," he shouted back, dodging a flurry of stubby wide blades as they danced around his head before shooting out a leg and catching Duel squarely in the gut. The masked man flipped backwards 2 meters, landed against an airborne Mosh Mosh, and launched himself back into the fray. The 4 mysterious combatants had forced the budding geniuses back into the hub. Their teams acted together in perfect unison, leading the prodigies to believe they had either been working together for years. The blonde turned as he leapt between bridges, unsealing a pair of windmill shuriken and tossing them at the mismatched mask barreling down on him. Duel threw his arms out and brought his weapons, 2 retractable blades hidden in the sleeves of his dingy jacket, into the holes of the large ninja stars. He instantly flung the weapons to the sides and slashed at the boy's neck, failing as the target grabbed the blades with bare hands. Mosh Mosh, bounding in from somewhere, wrapped his ironclad freak toes around the Uzumaki's arm, reeled back without support, and flung the genius wildly into the air. Oh hell, the undercover prodigy thought as he landed against a support pillar and secured himself in place with chakra, while sending the fox's energy to his injured hands. The cut smoke shut, and he pulled the extremities back to the tattoo seals on his arms and began a series of rapid movements, unsealing every variety of throwing weapons from the marks and tossing them at the freaks attacking him. The guy in the straitjacket, per usual, hopped around like a possessed spring, while the masked man charged headlong into the onslaught. Curiously, Duel turned to one side and his arm danced in mad random patterns, yet somehow he managed to deflect every single weapon thrown his direction. Upon approaching the prone boy, the odd man twisted to the other side and, with cold precision and determined movements, thrust the other bladed curse's head. "Where did you hide Shia?" he asked calmly as he began a lethal tango with the crimson-masked boy. "Why, do you want her back?" Naruto replied as he parried the Duel's short blades with his own twin broadswords. Duel's head shook violently for the briefest of moments, and he shrieked, "Just shut up and tell me, you freak. You're one to talk?" The blonde noted the sudden change in temperament, an aspect of this enemy that showed itself more and more as time went on. "Mood swings much?" he mused internally as he weaved around the flurry of blades. Hinata wasn't faring much better. From what she could see, the enemy girl was a medic of some sort. Every time she scored a hit on scythe, Nina would latch onto the belt-bound shinobi and promptly heal the injuries without saying a word or displaying any emotion whatsoever. The Hyuga wondered why such a colorful person showed no corresponding feelings. The demonic-looking man twisted his arm back, then lobbed his double-sided weapon at her, giving it a trademark deadly spin. Silence pulled her knees in to lower her total surface area as much as possible so she could utilize yin and yang's magnetic field and repel the tool of death. The generator inside the lethal top crackled as it spun, and, a moment later, a wave of opposing electric power formed a sphere around her and pulsed outward, knocking the elongated scythe away but not the entire threat. Silence peered up to find the medic girl had attached herself to the rotating weapon and, now that the instrument of battle had been thwarted, launched herself off with chakra at the female genius. Hinata swung her left arm out and ejected her needle-filled blade from its gauntlet. The weapon missed the target, instead impacting with a steel-toed foot that came out of nowhere. This guy again. Nina took the opportunity to reach around the interrupting limb and jab a precise scalpel of chakra into the Hyuga's right shoulder, temporarily rendering the limb numb and immobile. "Shit!" the prodigy cursed and remotely popped the bolt holding her blade in place, releasing the sharpened piece of metal, then split from the scene to put some distance between her and the multiple enemies. Mosh Mosh. Duel shouted, catching the attention of the absent-minded man. "Get back here!" The bound man gurgled something unintelligible and turned to his superior, and did something the prodigies had yet to see: stuck his tongue out. However, to say this was a childish gesture of defiance would be foolhardy. The organ slurped towards Curse, who was at least a dozen meters away, and two ring piercings at the tip of the tongue supported dual strings of barbed wire that emerged from the man's ever-smiling mouth. "What the shit?" Naruto cried as the moist and bladed organ wrapped around his arm and prevented him from swinging his ninjato against the masked ninja. The elongated tongue squeezed and dug into his flesh. "Ow! Ow, Curse!" Silence shouted as her chakra revitalized her right arm. She aimed her twin stake launchers at the stretched organ and fired with a blast of steam. Mosh Mosh seemed to get the point and retracted the makeshift weapon as he performed another gravity-defying series of flips and twists. There was no way a normal person was that agile. The Hyuga's airborne bolts exploded harmlessly, sending a hail of shrapnel in all directions, but injuring no one. An idea struck her, and she began to dance around the small fields of jagged needles left behind by her stakes, stringing wire around the slivers of metal with her foot like a living sewing machine. Her Byakugan saw Scythe's oversized weapon fly towards her and become entangled in her makeshift web. She glanced up to find Nina charging down the taut chain attached to the double-sided instrument of war and smirked. If this worked, she'd kill two birds with one stone. She pulled yin and yang from its supports on her back, unleashed its many curved blades from its center, and harshly inserted the weapon into the gaps of the long chain. The genius girl leapt from the kill zone and activated her electric device, sending a massive jolt of lightning up the steel links. Her bloodline eyes peered up and saw Scythe receive the full brunt of the attack, the metal loops in his many belts not helping his situation in any way. Hinata smirked when she saw him collapse on his perch, then grimaced when she noticed that Nina had, somehow, acted in time to avoid being toasted. The medic girl leapt off, twisted in midair, and then landed dead center but she was already wise to Silence's plan. She landed upside down on her extended index fingers, the digits meticulously placed between gaps in the metal strings. The Hyuga stepped forward in preparation to rush the medic, while she was vulnerable, but her foot slid the moment it touched down. She glanced down to find her discarded blade lying beneath her, and her intelligent mind acted swiftly. Bending over, she snatched the needled weapon off the ground and flung it with all her might with a chakra-charged limb. Nina saw the impromptu boomerang fly towards her and, with alert eyes, pushed herself off and started pulling her arms in, but it was too late. The rotating blade passed cleanly through her wrists, amputating her hands. The transferred momentum was enough to destroy her planned trajectory, and she fell back down on the wires. At the last moment, she attempted to use her feet to push herself out of the way of the electrified field of wires, but the pain in her limbs distracted her too much. She fell flat on her face, and everything went permanently dark as electricity crackled through her. Man, can I think on my feet, or what? Hinata congratulated herself internally before rushing off to assist her temporary ally. Naruto was having a rough time with Duel. The man was pissed at him for whatever reason, and he could implement his anger in his attacks flawlessly. "Why do you hate me so much I don't have to answer to the likes of you?" He shrieked back and glanced at an oncoming silence and grinned behind his mismatched visage. "But I'll fight both of you on equal ground." He leapt forward and engaged the blonde with the left side of his body, the side that acted cold and logical. "Hey, curse," Hinata announced as she entered the fray and was met with the stranger's other side, the chaotic one. "Need some help, yeah?" And so it went on. Duel's strange way of fighting simultaneously with separate styles did very well against the geniuses, and the Konoha duo countered every move. Strangely enough, no one ever gained the upper hand longer than a second and a half, and the masked man's skill was shown off by the fact that, despite the Uzumaki and Hyuga's use of advanced ninja techniques, he managed to outmaneuver them using hand-to-hand moves exclusively. The longest 10 minutes of the Prodigies' lives passed without producing any definite results, save the drain on their chakra reserves. "Where's that freaky guy?" Naruto asked his companion nonchalantly as he ducked under a solid swing. "Mosh mosh." Duel replied, not wholeheartedly pissed for once. "Wasn't talking to you, whatever." He sidestepped a blast of chakra-enhanced wind. "Where is he, anyway?" Hinata wondered out loud. "Who the hell knows?" He slipped back into disgruntled mode. "He does what I say, and I want to kill you too myself." "What is he?" the blue-haired girl continued. If she could keep the guy talking, it might divide his attention. "He's a freak built by our fucking leader. Dunno why he only listens to me, but he does." His mismatched mask glanced at the blonde boy, and the wild half of the man's hair quivered as if enraged. "And you?" He lunged with both arms. "Tell me where she is, there's my chance," the pale-eyed girl realized, seeing Duel's exposed side. She leaned forward and pressed her stake launchers against the man and fired at point-blank range. The combatant felt the weapons touch his clothes and arched his back to avoid being punctured and succeeded, somewhat. The timers inside the rods had been severely reduced for such a situation, resulting in the bolts exploding in a shower of shrapnel, peppering all three ninjas, but hammering the enemy much harder than the intelligent duo. Duel hit the ground shrieking in torment, squirming in unison with his pained voice. "Mosh mosh, get me out of here." The freak complied with a tongue wrapping around his jaw and yanking him from the fray. But the damages were not exclusive. Both Naruto and Hinata received their own share of molten needles. On the plus side, no permanent injuries were inflicted, such as the gouging of eyes and whatnot, but the pain was still there, and it was spread around evenly. The Hyuga had a harder time dealing with it. She didn't have a demon inside of her willing. "Lem help you," the blonde said as he extracted the last of his ragged needles. He knelt beside her and began systematically pulling the shards of metal from his ally. He was used to such things, but he knew she wouldn't be. "You can heal these, right?" He referred to the minor injuries. Yeah, she panted, smiling behind her crisp blue mask that someone would go out of their way to help her. The boy stood before her and helped her up as she began utilizing her chakra to plug the many holes. "Thanks," she said humbly. "No problem. Where's Duel?" She changed the subject. They began scanning the area to find said ninja and found him lying face up under the freak in the straitjacket. "Mosh mosh," the critically injured man gasped. His mismatched mask had slipped off to reveal brown eyes full of hate amidst a field of old scars. "This is my final order." A trembling arm reached up behind the sleeves of the straitjacket and slipped in to cut the straps. With the last of his strength, he yanked back and freed the man's arms. "Kill them all," he spoke his last and passed on with open eyes. The sleeves parted and the man's arms fell to the floor. Well, his hands did. In place of his arms were coils upon coils of barbed wire, surrounding some kind of stringy membrane that connected the hands to the body. The freak began to dance in an epileptic circle, building up momentum before throwing his arms out. Holy shit! The blonde shouted as he ran out of the way with his partner in tow. The faux limbs flew past him, and the clawed hands clenched the pillar behind them. Mosh pulled back, launching himself into the air at the young targets. He opened his mouth and shot out that unnatural tongue at the two, catching Hinata around the arm. Yanking his head back in a way that would snap a normal person's neck, he jerked the intelligent girl away from her rival and positioned his clawed feet to dig into her skull. Silence. Naruto shouted as he unsealed an oversized shuriken and tossed it at the airborne man. Despite his impeccable aim, the enemy twisted impossibly in mid-flight and continued his descent towards the trapped girl. Shit. The Uzumaki cursed as he unleashed his twin broadswords and stood over the Hyuga, ready to attack the freak when he got there. The enemy came within striking distance, and the boy thrust a sword at him and missed by a mile. At the last possible second, the multicolored freak twisted out of the way and landed right behind the young genius. Mosh swung his barbed arms into the boy while unraveling his tongue from the girl, while simultaneously running the organ painfully around his body. The blonde grunted as the many barbs scarred his flesh. He had hoped to take advantage of the enemy, while all his resources were focused on him, but every limb was a fully utilized weapon. The freak suddenly shrieked in pain and reeled a bloody tongue back into his mouth. Curse's hidden azure eyes glanced at his ally to find that she had punctured the sensitive organ with a piece of shrapnel, while she had the chance. Thanks a ton. The intelligent boy said as he secured the enemy's faux limbs to his bleeding body and attempted to throw the combatant into an uncontrollable spin. Sadly, it didn't work as Mosh merely moved in closer, leapt up, and painfully grasped the blonde's shoulders with clawed feet. The boy screamed in torment as the steel two digits dug resolutely into his flesh, and there was no way to shake the freak off. Damn it. Silence swore when she saw her partner trapped by the insane man. She stood and charged him with the intent to shoot an explosive rod right into his head, upon reaching the guy, but to no avail. Mosh, in a fit-crazed movement, turned and smashed his forehead into hers, rendering her unconscious. The blue-haired girl fell to the ground, unwillingly leaving her ally to fend for himself. Silence. Curse called when he saw her hit the dirt. Are you okay? The freak's tongue re-emerged and wrapped around his neck, cutting off his breathing. Silence, he gasped for the life-giving gas as the world began to darken. Silence, get up, please get up. His consciousness faded. The next thing the boy knew, he was standing over a bruised and broken Mosh. The man's limbs, false or otherwise, were either bent in unnatural directions or snapped off and straddled over the sides of the battle-torn bridge beneath his feet. What happened? He wondered as he began to inspect himself, finding no wounds whatsoever. Oh shit, he came to an unfortunate realization. Did the fox take over? He suddenly remembered his companion and ran towards her. Silence, hey, silence, are you okay? Hinata stirred and found herself staring into the eyes of her temporary ally. What's he doing here? She thought in a daze. Shouldn't he be? Oh, damn. She bolted up and peered intently at the freak's mangled corpse before glancing back at her rival. What happened? I'll get to that later. First, she stood to her feet and stretched a bit, noting any injuries as she did so. After satisfactorily determining that she wouldn't die, she replied, I'll live. Now, her voice took a lighter tone. You only got one, I got 3. She held out 3 fingers, smiling behind her blue visage. I won this time. Naruto's jaw dropped at the curveball, then curled into a wide smile. Yeah, I guess you did, he admitted his loss jovially. Really kicked my ass. The two laughed the situation off, and the Hyuga spoke again. I'm beat. You mind if we try again later? Not at all, I'm tired too. See you around. Catch you later. As they parted ways, the blonde scooped up Duel's white and green mask, while the pale-eyed girl gathered up Mosh's corpse for observation. Each party worked in silence at their small tasks. There might be something to learn from both. Naruto returned to his secret chamber and sighed heavily. He was exhausted, no two ways about it. Moving to replace his current clothes with those of his idiotic image, he decided against it. She had never seen the orange jumpsuit, and, if he could help it, she never would. He took the mismatched visage with him and opened the door to her crude prison. Rise and shine, he announced his arrival. Is it morning? Was the nervous reply. No, just felt like saying that. Listen, he strolled up to her. I fought some more guys tonight, and some of them were real freaks. Do you know about any more of them? Did you fight this guy? He tossed the mask onto her lap. She handled the scarred visage with shaky hands as she lifted it to her face. Why you fought this 01? The blonde frowned at the increase of her chronic stutter. Yeah. You know him and why you killed him? Tears began to well up in her brown eyes. "This can be good," he thought as he voiced a simple answer. "I wouldn't be here now if I didn't." The girl clasped the mask to her chest and broke down in the hardest fit of crying the boy had ever seen her exhibit. "Th, calm down," he held up his hands and softened his voice. "Take it slow. Who is this th? This I is my BB brother's mask." The rest of her blubbering was unintelligible. "Oh, damn it. I just killed her only emotional support. Wait, wasn't he her remaining family too?" Shia held nothing back as her head leaned against the bars, as her tears flowed like waterfalls. In the back of her mind, Aya tried to rationalize things, but her secondary self was every bit as attached to Duel as she was. The ground below soon became slick with salty tears, and the distraught girl was nowhere near finished. Naruto watched this display of sadness with mixed feelings. On the one hand, he knew he had to approach something like this with cold hard logic, but on the other hand, he had just killed off the only relative this girl had. His intelligent mind racked itself on what to do, but eventually empathy won out, seeing as how he had grown up without any family of his own. He said nothing during the whole ordeal, but he didn't have to. Shia didn't reel back from the physical contact, and it seemed to have a calming effect, if very small. 20 minutes later, the girl cried herself to sleep, and the blonde gently laid her on the ground through the prison bars. He stood to leave as quietly as possible and made his way for the open doorway. Before shutting the door and bolting it shut, he glanced at her one last time and muttered, "I'm sorry, Shia." Naruto awoke the next day to the early morning sun peeking over the horizon, beginning its illumination of the blue sky, but nowhere near full swing yet. He sat up, recalling the previous evening's actions and their ensuing consequences. Swinging himself out of bed, he glanced at the clock. Lots of time before I have to meet up with Jiraiya. Deciding to follow up on his unavoidable indiscretions, he strolled over to his vertical entryway, undid its many traps, and descended into his private chamber. Upon entry, he immediately donned enough of his alter ego's clothes to make his appearance decent. He grabbed some chilled meat from a cold locker and some vegetables from a separate food container, then placed them on an iron pan over a small pit. The food immediately began to cook once a blazing fire was set underneath, and the blonde waltzed over to the prison door, while waiting for the sustenance to become hot and edible. He undid the heavy locks, then swung the thick metal door open, and was instantly met with a quiet whimpering emanating from the back of the cell. His concealed azure eyes scanned the makeshift jail and found Shia huddled against the back wall, well away from the bars in every direction. He approached the steel barricade and gazed into her moist brown eyes, which glanced at him every so often. The boy wanted to say something, but nothing came to mind. Rather, it was more like he couldn't say anything to her. What? The auburn-haired girl broke the silence, not really bothering to look up. Drying tears stained her face, and her voice clearly displayed defeat. "I'm sorry," was all Naruto could think of. She slowly shook her head in a manner of disbelief. Please leave me alone." "I really am sorry," he continued. He honestly felt bad about it. "I didn't know what would she shouted in a sudden act of confidence. "Why don't know what it's like to n and not have a family? Why don't know what it's one like to be alone?" "I do," he interrupted calmly, "believe me, I do." "Why don't?" "Yes I do," he returned rather forcefully, slamming his hands against the bars to hammer his point home. She squeaked and frighted back farther away, if such a thing was possible, at the sudden move. The Uzumaki calmed his voice and tried again. "I've been alone since the day I was born. People hate me for no good reason, and only 4 people give half a damn that I'm even alive. Trust me on this." He leaned gently against the steel barrier. "You're not as alone as you think you are." "Liar," she muttered into her knees, hiding her face from her captor. Naruto shook his head ever so slightly and disappeared from the room for a moment. He returned with a tin tray of piping hot food and gingerly placed it on the floor. Shia didn't even glance at the steaming meal. The blonde began to run his hands along the bars, feeling out the weak points that he added when he first constructed the jail. After locating all the ones he sought, he applied a dash of his own chakra from the outside, and the metal rods disconnected and fell to the floor, creating a rudimentary doorway. He scooped up the heated tray and strolled over to his prisoner. She scooted away when he neared until her back hit the corner, effectively halting her nervous retreat. She whimpered again when the undercover genius knelt in front of her and placed the tray to the side and directed his mirror gaze into her eyes. He extended a hand and she cringed when a gentle palm graced the top of her head. "Shia, I really mean it. I am sorry." The girl's brown eyes suddenly became angled and harsh, and she lurched at the blonde. Her bound arms thrust for his throat but were stopped by his armored jettis handles that caught the chain, then shoved it behind her back, halting her forward momentum and planting her awkwardly on her knees. "Screw you," she shouted with unfamiliar venom. "Things were fine until you came along, Shia." He hadn't seen this side of her since their first encounter. "No, she berated him without missing a beat. "Because of you, both of us are gonna die, and I won't let that happen. I'll kill you before you can hurt us." Naruto realized that the girl's mind had fully fractured and took swift action. He grasped the angry face before him with both hands and brought his face close to hers, prompting the irritated eyes to contort in malevolent confusion. He pressed his crimson visage against her face and heard a stifled gasp. "I will not hurt you." Her head was too close for him to see her whole face, but he noticed the harsh eyes arch in surprise, then look away as if considering a strategic withdrawal. "Did she give up?" Asolaya said flatly before receding, leaving Shia in control again. She immediately burst into newfound tears. What do you want from me?" she sobbed before settling back into her little ball, letting loose the waterworks again. Naruto plopped down next to her and put an arm around her opposing shoulder. He knew the pain loneliness entailed and decided that no one should have to bear it, not even an enemy. After a while, the young girl ceased crying for the moment and half-heartedly started chewing her cooling meal, while the Uzumaki fixed the bars and locked the heavy metal door behind him. He changed garments again in preparation to emerge from his hidden chamber. He wondered what Silence was up to. That sudden train of thought struck him as a surprise, as he wasn't entirely certain what this new feeling was. Considering his young prisoner's recent situation, he wasn't sure what to think. Why is this so damn confusing? It doesn't make any sense. Hinata, having the benefit of being labeled as injured, had all the time she could have ever wanted to perform experiments to her heart's content, but none held her interest as much as the fresh cadaver before her. She had spent much of the next day dissecting Mosh to understand why he was so mutilated to begin with, and volumes of paperwork could be generated from the freak's corpse. Whoever did this, she murmured to no one in particular, was a damn genius to begin. All the fingers and toes had been shorn off, and some kind of mutated human-like claws were grafted in their place, allowing for independent movement. The joints in the man's legs had been modified in such a way that the limbs could bend in unnatural ways without breaking, and the long sinewy membranes that connected the hands to the body permitted signals to be received from the brain by the mildly disembodied appendages. The corresponding coils of barbed wire were simply grafted into the flesh. The impossibly elongated tongue and its wired weaponry were another story entirely. A large portion of the intestinal tract had been removed, and necessary organs save the lungs and heart had been forced down, creating room for an oversized and gruesomely constructed stomach that apparently housed the vast majority of the tongue. The false organ was lined with metal rods that supported the barbed wire and spiraled all the way up the man's trachea and ended just below the larynx, which explained why Mosh couldn't speak. The barbs, over time, had obliterated the voice box. The lungs and heart had been squashed dangerously to the insides of the ribs to allow the enlarged windpipe's existence. All of this is brilliant, she mentally praised the freak's creator, but this guy had to be in excruciating pain 24/7. She closed the enormous file, ordered her assisting Hyugas to store the body, and then took a breather on her couch to think about how the man could endure such torture. There must have been some kind of mental conditioning, there had to be. No one could willingly go through this wait. She thought of something. No one would volunteer for such a radical program, so that means he was forced. If he was forced, then that would mean the person behind this probably rules by fear rather than respect. Who does that? Before she knew it, the blue-haired girl spent 20 minutes staring into space, lost in deduction. It would have been longer if Shiori hadn't interrupted her. Mistress, the reassembled woman said jovially, there's some really interesting radio chatter. Coming. Danzo reclined on his couch in the secondary rec room deep within the Hokage Tower, with Homura and Kaheru seated opposite him. The three elder shinobi had convened to discuss the events of the previous evening, regarding the strongmen's activities in the unofficial route prowling grounds. So Danzo, Homura began, what have your forces found? How many parties were involved? I assume there were two, but since we know nothing about them, it is difficult to say. It's clear that one side was victorious, Homura added, then why was a single corpse left behind the old Warhawk side? Unfortunately, that is not the concern here. He paused for a moment and noted the elder's intrigue before continuing. The team that reported it responded to the chakra pulse at 11:20, but did not arrive at the scene until midnight. How is that unusual? The aging woman inquired. The tunnels are quite vast. The travel time to the battle's location from their starting point is 10 minutes, but they arrived 40 minutes later, and they don't remember why it took so long. This revelation left the elders wide-eyed. How on earth could creme of the crop shinobi simply lose track of time, and half an hour at that? Something was wrong, and the aging trio knew it. In a room far beneath the streets of Konoha, and away from all prying eyes, a minuscule light shimmered with brilliant colors, bathing the otherwise dark room with coalescence that covered every spectrum of the rainbow. A handful of figures stared at the mirrored lights, observing a scene involving three elder ninjas of the Leaf Village through the fist-sized portal. About time they noticed, Sten commented, glancing at the man in the faded blue suit. Your talents are much more versatile than I thought. This will keep the pawns busy for a while. Now Sten, the shadowed leader of the group, chided with his usually suave tone, they are clients. They are to be treated with utmost respect as long as they uphold their part of the bargain. Any miscellaneous work they may conduct that does not interfere with the agreement is completely acceptable. The hooded man merely nodded. He didn't care to argue, especially not with his boss. Now, doctor, the head of the mysterious organization addressed the lackadaisical surgeon. Are these materials suitable for your needs? The lazy medical man picked his ear with his right pinky finger. Well, the big guy Sith, or whatever his name is, has a suitable bone structure, but his insides are toast. He turned to the teenage girl lying next to the belted corpse before him. And this kid, Nina, has an exceptional nervous system and a really good regenerative capacity. Is it? The pale businessman that spoke with a lisp urged the doctor to finish. Enough for the quota. Nah, the big quai's muscles are fried too, and the girl's regenerative capabilities aren't enough to repair them completely. I'll need either a whole new set of muscles that match the big quai's build, or to mend all that shit together with some kinda. He paused to find accurate wording, biological stitches that won't come undone when the muscle fibers finally heal. And what do you have in mind, doctor? The leader inquired. He shrugged with bemused indifference. Dunno, never seen anything like what I'll need before. I'll have to synthesize it from the ground up. Very well, the shrouded man agreed benevolently. Can you give me a projected time frame for your work? Once again, a shrug preceded the reply. Years, don't know how long. Sten decided to add his 2 cents. From what you just said, it sounds like if we supplied you with biological stitches you would finish sooner. Yep, got any ideas? Yeah, he turned toward his leader. Isn't there one guy with that? Or they are business partners, he interrupted, and thus must be treated as allies until they violate our agreement or otherwise dispose of their resources. If who you're thinking of should pass away and not be collected, then we could acquire him properly. He then turned toward the bored man of medicine. Doctor, please begin working and we'll contact you should any news arise. Yeah, whatever, was the apathetic response before he, the man in the dull suit, and the cadavers disappeared in a flash of coalescing lights. What about Hinata Hyuga? Sten inquired when he was left alone with his leader. What do you mean? Naruto Uzumaki already has a down payment on his head, so acquiring him is out of the question. But what about the girl? Yes, I see your point. A few seconds passed as he considered. Well, she is an asset like everything else. I once had a contract with the Hidden Cloud Village to arrange for her acquisition until they reneged on our agreement at the last minute and lost my support. I'm sure someone out there with something of value to offer in return will gain an interest for her. The Hokage couldn't shake that ominous feeling. Ever since hearing of the Snake Sannin's return he had been on edge and, coupling that with the faint pulse of chakra he felt the previous night, he was intensely worried. For a moment he wondered if the two were related, and that idea scared the hell out of him. If Orochimaru had anything to do with that, then he must have something going on, but I had the same feeling several months ago, so that would mean, if he truly is responsible for it, he's had something going on here for quite a while. The only reason I have to doubt myself is that Kaharu and Hamura claim they know nothing about it. He frowned at that new train of thought. But if I'm not losing it, then there's no way they didn't notice it as well. But then why are they lying? Are they in on it? And if they are, what do they have to gain? Why would they help destroy the village? He shook his head to clear his mind. Listen to me, I sound like I'm going senile. But, he took an extended pull on his pipe, it's my job to be paranoid. He gazed at the endless paperwork before him and groaned, deciding to procrastinate a little longer. I wonder how Kakashi's assignment is going off in Araki training ground. A certain one-eyed Jonin sneezed mightily through his face mask. Such a thing was incredibly rare for Kakashi, and everyone knew it. Crap, he thought, now I gotta clean this thing. He glanced at his studious watch. You know, Sasuke's really getting into this training. He's running himself into the ground doing it too. He must be unconsciously competing with Naruto. He paused at that idea. Speaking of which, I haven't seen much of him lately. I handed him over to Ibisu, but that guy doesn't seem to be real busy these days, so where's Naruto? He noticed the youngest Uchiha fall to his knees in exhaustion. All right, Sasuke, take a break. You've been at this all day. No, he panted, desperately trying to catch his breath. I can keep going. The haddock merely shrugged and continued, thinking, I've got to surpass him. Curse made a fool of me, and I've got to surpass him. I'm in a Uchiha, I have to be greater than him. The self-proclaimed Avenger built up another static charge of chakra-induced electricity in his hand and rushed the defenseless boulder before him. Kurenai sat leisurely in her home as the sun began to dip into the horizon, resting after her practice session with Kiba and Shino to prepare the bug user for his debut at the main attraction of the Chunin exam. Hinata, as far as she knew, spent the day at home due to injuries inflicted by Niji. I feel so bad for the poor girl, she thought, taking a sip of tea she had recently brewed. She didn't deserve such treatment from her snob of a cousin, she's been trying so hard lately. She set the cup down and observed a stalk float to the surface, lost in her own mind. But when I checked up on her the other day, she seemed fine. She didn't act like anything was wrong, yet she still exhibited signs of it. Several hours later, well after much of the Hyuga household had retired for the day, the young heiress to the prestigious clan dashed through one of the many tunnels of the catacombs beneath Konoha as her true self, Silence. As she neared the massive vertical tunnel that connected to many of the other passageways, her heart skipped a beat. She was looking forward to tonight's battle alongside Curse. If things went well, they would eliminate the Jashin follower and possibly take down the Stikami. Should be an exciting fight. I can't wait. She paused mentally. Was it the fight she was looking forward to, or was it meeting up with Curse? Such an idea struck her as incredibly odd, mostly because she honestly couldn't tell. Do I want a challenging fight, or do I just want to have it with Curse? Her indecision continued as she entered the battle-scarred shaft and awaited her crimson-masked rival to appear. Several minutes passed and she heard the familiar cling of metal on stone. Those were her allies' armored Jetis sandals hitting the floor. She swung her concealed head around to find the boy casually strolling out of an opposing hallway. Feeling those uncomfortable thoughts rising again, she shoved them aside and greeted the fellow genius. Hey hey, he replied, raising an open palm. In truth, he was every bit as glad to see the girl as she was to see him. His unhindered smile was as wide as hers. Ready to kick some ass, of course, she grinned behind her dull blue visage before rushing down their planned route, intentions to eliminate their enemies together as strong as ever. Takemi, per usual, sat on her stone chair in her private smoke-choked chamber that reeked of hard liquor while guzzling whiskey. Her harsh amber eyes turned towards the door when the huge thing creaked open, revealing Fumetsu's unwavering apathetic form. Sup, she greeted benevolently. What I gotta say, fucker, one of our forward cameras has spotted Curse and Silence breaching the perimeter. Anyone gonna get him? Our forces are stretched far too thin. I would not advise sending any of our weaker teams to intercept them. Yeah, like any of those dickless shitters'll listen to me anyway. You go. The undying man blinked a few times and stared blankly at her. Commander, you heard me, asshole. Go get him. Yes, Commander. He bowed his head ever so slightly before stepping back through the doorway. I'll take my leave now. He shut his superior's door, then turned to stroll calmly towards a point he knew the intruders would have to pass through. The smallest of smiles upturned the edges of his lips and he muttered, by the honor of Jashin. Naruto and Hinata sailed through the dim hallways that made up the inner workings of the foreign threat. Strangely enough, there weren't many signs of anyone living in the area other than two small chambers loaded with dirty bunks and a single room lined with empty weapon racks. Where is everyone? Curse thought out loud. All our opponents made it sound like there were tons of enemies here. I know, Silence replied. Looks like no one's home. Then where the hell did they go? No idea. Maybe. She began to formulate an idea when her Byakugan noted a large individual emerge from the end of the passage. Wait a sec, he looks familiar. Why? The blonde returned as he unsealed a metal spear. Someone you know? As the Konoha duo neared, the monstrous man's form became clearer and clearer in the Hyuga's amplified eyes. Yep, she stated once she was certain. That's Fumetsu. Who the Jashin follower. Why didn't you say so? He released a large shuriken from one of his partially invisible tattoos and lobbed it at the undying enemy. The weapon flew true to its aim, whistling as it passed through the stifled air towards the dull-looking assassin. Upon reaching the target, the silhouetted form threw an arm out and caught it by the edge without a second thought. The shadowy man discarded the spent oversized throwing star as if he had no cares in the world, then disappeared around a corner concealed by the poor lighting. The intelligent pair screeched to a halt beside the intersecting hallway and pressed their backs against the wall, weapons of choice in hand. I'll cover the opposite side, the Uzumaki whispered to the girl by his side. You hug this wall and give me cover with that stake launcher thing. The female genius merely nodded and the two rushed around the corner to find nothing. There was no enemy, just another long dim hallway before them. Without saying a word, Curse and Silence maneuvered swiftly and carefully, halting to inspect all intersecting passageways they came across. Every so often Hinata's Byakugan would capture a glimpse of casual movement, but the undercover geniuses never caught up in time to intercept the offending individual. Wait. Naruto stated after clearing several corners with his temporary partner, "We are going in circles." Hinata stopped and thought about that for a moment. Holy shit, she realized, he's right. This place is a damn maze. Her superior vision noticed a tiny slit in the wall suddenly fill, and whatever was blocking it kept coming. Look out, the blonde prodigy was taken aback as his partner shoved him a split second before a long chipped cutlass slid out from the wall with dangerous ferocity, inflicting a small cut on the boy's cheek. Holy crap, he shouted as the inconsequential injury instantly began to smoke shut, and he leapt away from the wall. Where did that come from behind that wall? Hinata shot back, moving away alongside her fellow genius. He's behind that wall, guess I couldn't avoid it for long, the boy thought as he bit his thumb and touched his palm to the floor, invoking a complex series of seals. Thick smoke rushed forward then cleared, leaving behind a huge blood-red frog easily larger than himself. The animal was covered with green/tattoos and wore a full set of battle armor with a huge brush that doubled as a club strapped onto its back. The genius girl's pale eyes were wide as dinner plates behind her dull azure mask. That's a summon, and he did it without a scroll. That means Curse has a contract with toads. This is big, this is so big. The huge amphibious animal turned towards its master and, if frogs had lips, smiled wide. "Hey Curse," it croaked, "how's it going?" "She's not my girlfriend, oh yeah?" The frog looked back and forth between the two and commented, "Well, you look good together anyway." It lurched forward, punched a massive hole through the wall with the reinforced bulge in the paintbrush, and then hopped through. After the Konoha duo forced the blood back down out of their faces, they followed the useful summon into a cold chamber. "Oh man," the Uzumaki whistled, "did all those halls line rooms like this? This place really is a maze," the Hyuga whispered, the warmth of her breath enough to steam in the freezing air. The place was damp with random leaks dripping from everywhere, and dying fluorescent lights gave the room a sickly green appearance. "Reminds me of a morgue." "Hey Gamaka," the blonde addressed his summon as he resealed his sleek steel spear. "Lem handled the brush." "Sure." It graciously handed the cumbersome weapon over. "But what do you want me to do without it?" He nodded at his female companion. "Help her out in any way you can." "I need to get within point-blank range of the enemy," Hinata commented, moving a film-covered palm over her energy weapon. "That's all I'll need to kill him." "You got it." It crouched to the ground as frogs do and said, "Hop on, little missy." She obeyed and the newly minted team sat there dynamically. "Where the hell did he go?" Curse muttered, scanning the grungy tiled room. "I can't see him." "He's right there," the Hyuga stated nonchalantly, pointing at shadows at the end of the elongated room. "I was wondering how long it would take you." The deep voice of Fumetsu rumbled off the dirty walls, accompanied by slow deliberate footsteps. A few tense seconds passed, and the undying assassin eventually came into view under the weak fluorescent bulbs. "Silence, we meet again, you Fumetsu?" Curse inquired calmly, looking absolutely ridiculous wielding that oversized brush. "You must be Curse," the immortal greeted flatly as he drew his thick battered cutlass. "But that doesn't matter anymore. I have been tasked with killing both of you tonight." He pulled out a string of beads and, with a flick of the wrist, wrapped them around his hand. "Mustn't forget to pray first. Wouldn't want to commit heresy." The geniuses said nothing for a moment, too shocked to do so. But their voices soon returned in the form of simultaneous shouts. "What the hell, be quiet," Fumetsu ordered flatly before continuing his inaudible muttering. The prodigies decided not to give the man time and rushed him in the middle of his prayer. Hinata, comfortably seated atop Gamaka, began to charge her liquidating weapon, while her temporary ally reeled the club back. The frog landed atop the assassin, and Hinata leapt off, aiming her watery incendiary device at his head, then flinched when the large summon rolled over her in a sudden bout of pain. The crimson toad sported a fresh bleeding wound between the armored plates on its belly. "Damn it." The Hyuga shouted in delayed frustration as she freed herself from the squirming Gamaka. "Get him." Naruto said nothing as his borrowed club slammed into the enemy's gut. Fumetsu had gotten to his feet at the moment, and the force imparted by the faux brush sent him flying into the tiled wall, leaving behind a cracked imprint. The undying assassin merely shook off the blow and raised his sword towards the blonde in an unspoken challenge. "Silence, aimed your dual stake launchers at the opponent and fired." The exploding rods traveled at blinding speed through the air and grazed Fumetsu, embedding themselves into the wall behind him. The stakes exploded and showered the Jashin follower from the back with burning slivers, searing his flesh with the heat, but not invoking any significant reaction, other than him bending his head to crack his neck. Never tried this on a summon before, the undying assassin commented. Shit. Naruto swore as he shouldered the faux brush and put his fingers together in a familiar pattern. A moment later, smoke rushed forth to reveal 4 exact copies of himself. You guys know what to do. Go. A quartet of identical masked faces nodded, and the clones rushed off to the 4 corners of the large room, painting the floor with their respective copies of the oversized toad's brush. As they went out, Fumetsu merely eaved this new development without concern. He completed the smear of blood within the circle and stood tall, the barest of smirks distorting his otherwise apathetic features. In an instant, his body attuned itself to the oversized frog, and his features shifted to that of an exaggerated voodoo-like skeleton. He raised his thick cutlass against his stomach and said, "It's over for that one," then plunged the blade into his gut. The summoned frog immediately reeled back, blood spurting from its soft belly. Hinata knew the toad was doomed and, not wanting to be in the vicinity of a desperate animal, moved away. Hey curse, Gamaka croaked. "I don't think I can hang around for much longer. It's fine, Gamaka." The blonde yelled back, "You can go home if you want." Sorry. The toad disappeared in a poof of smoke as it traveled back to its own dimension, taking with it the ornate club that the Uzumaki had borrowed. Glad I did that in time, the boy thought, noting that his clones still possessed their copies of the false brush. Now let's hope they get that seal done in time. The blonde rushed forth with his metal spear in hand to confront the Jashin follower head-on. However, he knew such a maneuver was suicide and, at the last possible moment, created a pair of shadow clones that sported the chain gauntlets copied from the Demon Brothers. The copies tried to circle the enemy and entangle him in the bladed chain, but one of them met their demise with a sword to the neck, leaving the connected weapon worthless. Fumetsu glanced up. For a split second, while the gauntlet's chain was being strung, it was taut. While it was in such a tight state, Curse jabbed the edge of his spear into one of the links and launched himself into the air, intent on bringing the elongated tool of battle down on the assassin. The foreign enemy thrust an arm out and caught the metal spear behind the blade, halting the blonde's airborne movement. The boy released the staff weapon and, shoving off his end of the captured tool, pushed himself away from the immortal. The assassin spun the spear in his hand and struck the other clone in the back hard enough to break its spine, ending the copy's brief existence. He stabbed the staff weapon into the broken tile at his feet and waited for his opponent to re-engage him. Suddenly, he felt a burning sensation on his back and swung around, clashing his curved sword against a familiar device. Silence, having seen her ally momentarily distracting the enemy, decided to move in for the kill. She activated her energy weapon, so its internal generator would have the burning liquid ready when she was within range of the enemy. Unfortunately, her temporary partner's feint was thwarted, leaving the genius girl to her own machinations. At that point she was committed to her attack, so she thrust her pulsing device forward, searing fluid beginning to seep out and rip down the enemy's back, and attracting his unwanted attention. She leapt back, her delicate machine powering down, but now slowly leaking liquid from the large gash inflicted by Fumetsu's cutlass. "Damn it," she swore, "now I've got a time limit. Looks like I'll just have to settle for his head." Naruto saw what happened and rushed in to behead the enemy, while the man's attention was diverted, but he didn't reach the assassin in time. His released ninjato met the chipped sword, and the blades danced to the tones of steel scraping against steel. The Uzumaki's swordsmanship was far superior to that of the Jashin follower, but the opponent's advantages were threefold. He had no need to worry about fatal injuries. His blows, while simple strikes, carried an enormous amount of force, and, the most frightening of all, he only needed one injury to doom his opponent. What Fumetsu lacked in skill he made for with tenacity, strength, and intimidation. The blonde was eventually thrown back by a powerful thrust, and his azure eyes glanced back and forth to locate his clones. Good, he found them hastily painting the ground with their oversized brushes, slowly working their way towards the center of the room. "I bet that seal will throw him off enough for me to take his head." The foreign enemy, however, noticed the boy's hesitation in jumping back into the fight, and his own bored eyes gazed at the clones. He stabbed his sword into the tile floor at his feet and began running his hands through a series of seals, something neither prodigy had seen him do until now. Hinata watched the man's fingers carefully, attempting to understand how his chakra would mold so she could counter the technique the moment it activated. A heartbeat later, she realized a lot of earth seals in there the second after the assassin completed his moves, and the ground underneath his bloody symbol began to rumble. The tiles cracked around his feet and the floor directly beneath him began to move, advancing as it subtly became mobile. Fumetsu had pulled off an invaluable technique for any believer of Jashin, the ability to move around while still within the confines of his damage-sharing mark. Shit. Naruto realized, he's going for the clones. He turned to his partner and yelled, "We gotta protect the clones." The Hyuga sprinted into action alongside her fellow genius and yelled back, "The clones will help us do that if they complete the seal." Her Byakugan focused and she saw that there was indeed a huge seal being painted on the floor. "What is it? Explosion seal?" he explained, running his legs ragged to catch up to the undying assassin. "It'll tear the floor out from under him." She kept any further questions to herself while glancing at the leaking device in her hand. About half of the liquid remained. "Gotta hurry." Fumetsu, standing triumphantly on his moving hunk of tiled floor, pulled Curse's captured spear from the mobile perch and stabbed at a clone, missing by a hair. He pulled back and thrust wildly a few more times, while the moving piece of stone weaved shallow trenches into the floor, eventually nailing the misfortunate copy on the fifth try. The clone popped from existence as the mobile rock swiveled in place, then shot towards the cursed copy at the opposite end of the dim room. The assassin clashed with Naruto and Hinata as he passed them. "Holy hell," Silence exclaimed under her breath, "he's friggin' fast." "Catch him." The Konoha duo pulled a full reversal as they skidded to a halt and took off in the opposing direction, pouring chakra into their legs to catch up to the frighteningly swift immortal. They intercepted him halfway across the large chamber, and the blonde threw out his hand and released a salvo of bladed yo-yos from his seal Loden rings. "Haven't used these in a while," he mused. "They'll come in handy this time." He manipulated the attached wires, and the lethal plaything spun around the enemy, binding him in the tight metal strings. "Now," he commanded the female genius, "get him." The girl leapt onto the platform as it slowed to a stop and planted her device against the man's forehead. She pulled the trigger and the machine whirred to life. Seconds later, the stored liquid began to burn with acidic ferocity and flow forth, but a small gusher oozed out from the gash in the cylinder, spattering on a few of the wires and disintegrating them. Fumetsu reacted the instant he felt something loosen on his body and lurched forward, cracking his skull on the blue-haired girl's head while worming an arm free from its flimsy confines. His emancipated hand grasped the undercover prodigy around the throat, and he lifted her off the ground, angling his cutlass upwards at her with his trap limb. "May as well just kill you directly," he commented lifelessly and pulled her towards him, intent on impaling her small body on his waiting blade, but the girl stopped centimeters away from death. Naruto had rushed in and, desperately keeping the remaining intact wires taut, grasped the immortal's free arm by the wrist and pushed it back. The boy was at an incredibly awkward angle as he came in from the side rather than the front, and it took every ounce of strength from his young muscles to hold the resisting limb at bay. "Such loyalty," the enemy said apathetically as he eyed the boy, "but time is on my side. Your muscles will give out eventually. Not if I can help it." Naruto returned before turning his head towards the still struggling Hyuga. "You still awake?" "Yeah," she choked. Her body was smaller and, as such, possessed a smaller musculature. Currently, her arms and hands pushed their limits, keeping the opponent's iron grip from suffocating her, and the gradually decreasing amount of oxygen flowing to her brain hindered her better judgment on using her legs for useful purpose other than hopelessly flailing about in the air. "Do something," she pleaded with a strangled voice. Curse said nothing. He noted that his clones were nearing completion, even accounting for their singular loss. He knew that once the simple seal was finished, Fumetsu's grasp on the situation would deteriorate. The muscles in the boy's arms and legs began to shake and go numb as they were strained to their limits. "Damn it." The shadow clones nodded satisfactorily to each other when the chamber began to rumble and popped out of existence. The enormous seal, stretching from each corner of the room and converging in the center, gave off a faint glow as it activated. Tiles cracked into uncountable thousands of pieces, and the grungy floor surged upwards a few feet, small canyons forming as the ground split apart in the wide explosion. Time stood still for a few heartbeats, and the debris seemed to dangle in the air, before falling back to earth. The combatants also fell with the floor, which was now much farther down, thanks to Naruto's backup plan. As the pair of geniuses tumbled, they searched each other out through the chaotic mess of descending rubble, latching onto the other. "You okay?" the blonde shouted over the roar of the airborne landslide. Silence coughed. "Yeah," she answered, blushing ever so slightly at where Curse's hand was. She knew he didn't mean anything by it given their current situation, but still it was nice. A moment later, the remnants of the unkempt floor crashed in a new, much larger chamber. While sailing through the air, the Konoha duo saw some remnants of light that were quickly extinguished when the wreckage hit the ground and spewed forth a cavalcade of wind and dust, snuffing out what had to be candles. They stood amidst the craggy boulders and peered into the darkness. Damn, Naruto cursed. Can't see a thing. The Hyuga said, by Akigan easily piercing the void. She turned her head and peered through the dull azure mask to her right. Seeing in the dark, the male prodigy wondered. First she can dispel genjutsu without even trying, and now she can see in the dark without even having eye holes. I swear this sounds familiar. There, the girl's voice broke him from his revelry. Fumetsu's over there. Is he standing? He whispered his inquiry. Yeah, she answered with a hushed tone. Wait a second, there's someone else. The blonde became alert. They were having enough trouble with one enemy. Two could be bad. His heightened senses picked up an odor that was out of place in the battlefield. Is that? He sniffed the air. Alcohol. Hinata stopped and took a deep whiff as well. Sure enough, it was liquor. But why was it here? Was it related to the newcomer? Or had it been there all along and they hadn't noticed it until now? The blue-haired girl shook her shrouded head to clear her thoughts and grasped her partner's hand. Let's go. Yeah, Naruto returned quietly as his ally led him swiftly through the darkened chamber. His eyes were slowly adjusting to the lack of light, but he considered himself blind as a bat. All he could really make out was the girl holding his hand running in front of him. For a split second he fantasized that he wasn't in a battle and was merely messing around having fun with silence before the illusionary moment passed. A minute of dodging and weaving through the forest of crumbling debris brought the prodigies upon the other presences in the room. The blonde, sadly, was still unable to see anything worthwhile, but at least he could hear the yelling and smell the cigarettes and booze. The Hyuga heiress didn't have that handicap, though. Her bloodline revealed all. Her sharp eyes easily made out Fumetsu struggling to stand with broken legs. Did he have those wounds when we fell? She wondered, observing the clean cuts of the bones jutting from his lower limbs, or were those inflicted by her? A sudden one-sided shouting match broke out between the strange woman and the immortal, answering her mental inquiry. You worthless fuck. The newly arrived female screeched, you're my second in command, can you do shit? Fucking worthless, asshole. The undying assassin regarded her with cold eyes and held his chipped cutlass against her. Why did you do this, Commander? He asked apathetically. I merely lost the advantage for a moment, so why? Shut up, undead fuckface. She shouted and planted a steel-plated boot in the prone man's face, knocking him back a few feet. At least now I got a reason to kill you. She undid a clip on her belt, released an attached glass bottle, and took a deep swig of the liquid within. The moment the bottle became upturned and she guzzled a mouthful of the stuff, she suddenly lurched forward and spewed forth a stream of flames, engulfing the assassin in a searing blaze. The Jashin follower cursed mightily in a singular display of emotion as he convulsed in the fire, slowly burning. Another burst emerged from the brutal-looking woman's lips, and all his frantic movement ceased as his head received the brunt of the attack and became nothing more than a cinder. A moment later. Now that there was a healthy fire, Naruto could see the assailant in the dancing light. She appeared to be in her early to mid-30s, and her deep crimson hair flowed chaotically down to the center of her back and hung loosely above her harsh amber eyes. She wore a sleeveless shirt that matched her hair and showed off the tough skin of her well-built arms. Her dark leather pants possessed so many studs that they appeared to be made of metal at first glance and were held up by a belt that had clean glass bottles of alcohol and cigarettes clipped on. Her ebony boots had a disorderly network of interconnecting steel plates screwed on, and some kind of weapon was strapped to her back, but the boy couldn't make it out in the shadows. Takemi, I presume? The Uzumaki went out on a limb. One and the same, fucker, the woman answered, her lips contorted as if ready to spit at a moment's notice. Curse and silence. The Konoha duo nodded, their tired muscles tensing for the ensuing attack. Let's get this shit over with. Takemi withdrew an unfiltered cigarette from a crumpled pack on her belt, lit it over the flames that consumed Fumetsu, and took a deep pull from the oral fixation. Let's rock, fuckers.